There's a three-letter badge on the back of certain Porsches that sends grown adults onto waiting lists years long just for the chance to buy one. GT. Most people walk right past it, but it didn't start as the ultimate Porsche. It started as an accident, a car built only because a rulebook forced them to. It was ignored. Then it was worshipped. Then it became the most wanted Porsche on earth. Here's why those two letters now outrank almost everything else the company makes. The accident that started it all. To understand what GT means, you have to go back to 1999, and you have to understand a very boring word that changed everything: homologation. Here's the situation Porsche was in. They wanted to go racing. Specifically, they wanted to race the 911 in the GT class, one of the most competitive categories in motorsport. But there was a rule, and the rule was strict. If you wanted to race a car, you couldn't just build a one-off track weapon. You had to also sell a road-going version of it to the public. The idea was to keep racing honest, to make sure the cars on the track were based on cars real people could actually buy. That process, turning a race car into a street-legal production car so you're allowed to compete, is called homologation. So Porsche had no choice. To legalize their race car, they had to build a road version, and in 1999, that road version got a name: the 911 GT3. The 3 came from the GT3 racing class it was built to compete in. And here's the part that tells you everything about how this started. Inside Porsche, this car was not seen as a big deal. It was a technicality, a box to tick. Financially, it barely registered. It existed purely so the race car had a license plate. Nobody in that building could have told you they had just created what would become the most desirable bloodline in the entire company. And there's a beautiful irony buried in the name. The road car was called the GT3. The race car it was built to legalize was originally called the RS. But Preuninger, the man we'll meet in a second, loved the RS name so much he took it for the street cars, and the race car ended up being renamed. The tail started wagging the dog almost immediately, because something unexpected happened when that first GT3 hit the road. It was, to put it simply, the purest, sharpest, most thrilling 911 anyone had ever driven. It wasn't loaded with luxury. It wasn't trying to be comfortable. It was stripped down, focused, and savagely fast, because it was fundamentally a race car underneath, just with a passenger seat and a license plate. And a small group of very serious drivers realized something incredible. They could buy this thing, drive it to a racetrack on a Saturday morning, set lap times that embarrassed exotic cars, costing 3 and 4 times as much, and then calmly drive it home and to work on Monday. A genuine, homologated race car you could use every day. That combination had almost never existed before. Not at this price, not at this level of ability. The box-ticking technicality had accidentally become the most exciting car Porsche made. The man who built the legend. Now, every great car story has a person behind it, and the GT story has one of the best in the entire industry. His name is Andreas Preuninger, and in the Porsche world, this man is a legend. They call him Mr. GT3. Preuninger's story is almost too perfect. He grew up in a Porsche-obsessed family, and as a kid, his bedroom wall was covered with pictures of exactly one car, a 1973 911 Carrera RS, white with blue lettering. That specific car, that white and blue race-bred 911, was the dream that lived in his head from childhood. He didn't just like Porsches, he was consumed by them. His father worked for a company that supplied parts to Porsche, and as a young man, Preuninger visited the Porsche Development Center at a place called Weissach. And in that moment, he later said, it became completely clear to him that was the only place on earth he needed to work. He got his foot in the door not as some celebrated star engineer, but by grinding his way in, eventually becoming an instructor at Porsche's own high-performance driving school. And that's where fate stepped in. Among the cars he was using to teach were 2 of the very first GT3 development prototypes, one yellow, one a strange metallic orange, the team nicknamed Sausage Metallic, because it looked like a particular German sausage. He got to drive these raw, pre-production race cars for the road before almost anyone on earth. And he fell completely, hopelessly in love. And when Porsche formed a small, dedicated department to build these hardcore cars, Preuninger became its heart and soul. He has now run that GT department for a quarter of a century. Almost every single GT car you can name, the ones enthusiasts obsess over, were shaped by this one man and his tight-knit team. And here's how you should think about that department. Inside Porsche, which is already a company obsessed with performance, there is a tiny special operations unit, a skunkworks. It sits inside Porsche's motorsport division, right next to the people building the actual race cars at Weissach. While the main factory builds tens of thousands of regular 911s, this small team takes those cars and rebuilds them into something far more extreme. They are essentially the most respected in-house tuning operation in the world, except they're not a separate company. They are Porsche's own hardcore heart, given a license to build the cars they themselves would want to own. What actually makes a GT car different? Okay, so let's get to the question everyone actually clicked on. You're looking at two 911s. One is a normal Carrera, the other has a GT badge. They look similar. What is actually different? Because the answer is almost everything that matters. Start with the engine. A regular 911 Carrera today and the famous 911 Turbo use turbochargers. Turbos make big, easy power, and they make it comfortable. The GT3, on the other hand, uses a naturally aspirated engine, no turbos at all. And that is a deliberate, almost stubborn choice. A naturally aspirated engine is harder to build, makes less easy power, but it does something magical. It revs. The GT3's 4-liter flat six screams all the way to 9,000 revolutions per minute, 9,000. Most road cars run out of breath at 6 or 7. That howling race car top end is something a turbocharged engine physically cannot replicate, and it's the single biggest reason purists worship these cars. It makes around 500 horsepower, but the number isn't the point. The way it delivers that power, the sound, the response, the way it builds and builds, that's the point. Next, the parts underneath. When Preuninger first arrived, a GT car might have 100 components that were different from a normal 911. Today, that number is closer to 1,000. Read that again. 1,000 parts on a GT car are unique, not shared with the standard car. The suspension is a completely different design, borrowed directly from Porsche's actual endurance race cars. The aerodynamics are real, functional race car aerodynamics, not decoration. That giant wing on the back of a GT3 RS isn't for show. It presses the car into the road with hundreds of pounds of downforce, so it can corner at speeds that would send a normal car flying off the track. Then there's what they take away, which matters just as much as what they add. GT cars are obsessively stripped of weight. Sound deadening, gone. Rear seats, often gone. Heavy sound systems, deleted. Regular door handles replaced with lightweight fabric pull straps. Carbon fiber, magnesium, and titanium used everywhere to shave off every possible pound. Because a race car doesn't care if you're comfortable. It cares about being fast. So a GT car gives you a harder ride, more noise, fewer luxuries, and in exchange, it gives you an experience that is as close to a real race car as you can legally drive on a public road. And here's the counterintuitive part that surprises people. Despite all of that, a GT3 is not some undrivable, bone-shaking misery. That's the genius of the department. These cars are savage on a track, but Porsche engineers them so they can still, just barely, be lived with. You can drive a GT3 to work. It has a warranty. It has air conditioning if you want it. That's the whole magic trick. Taking something with the heart and bones of a race car and making it just usable enough that a real person can own one and actually enjoy it, not just look at it. That's the core difference in one sentence. A normal Porsche is a brilliant sports car built to do everything well, quick, comfortable, usable every single day. A GT Porsche throws some of that everyday comfort in the bin on purpose in exchange for being a genuine race car that you're allowed to drive on the street. The family tree. Now, before we go further, if you're enjoying this, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps the channel grow and it's free. Now let's break down the GT family, because these badges confuse a lot of people, and knowing the difference instantly makes you sound like you know your stuff. At the heart of it all is the GT3. This is the icon, naturally aspirated, rear-wheel drive, available with an honest-to-God manual gearbox, and focused on being the purest driving experience Porsche makes. If someone says GT car, this is the default. Then there's the GT3 with the touring package, which is the exact same car but without the giant rear wing for the person who wants all that performance in a subtler suit that doesn't scream track day in the office parking lot. Above the GT3 sits the GT3 RS. RS stands for Rennsport, German for racing sport. If the GT3 is a race car for the road, the RS is a track weapon that happens to be legal on the road. It takes everything further. Wilder aerodynamics, including movable wing elements borrowed from Formula One that can stall the wing on the straights for more speed, more downforce, less weight, sharper everything. It's the car you buy when your GT3 isn't extreme enough, and it will humiliate cars costing 3 times as much around a racetrack. And then, at the very top, the one that earns a nervous kind of respect, the GT2 RS. Take the naturally aspirated purity of the GT cars and then do the one thing that sounds insane. Add 2 turbochargers to the most hardcore chassis Porsche builds. The result is the most powerful and the fastest 911 ever made, around 700 horsepower sent only to the rear wheels. Enthusiasts have a nickname for the GT2 lineage, the Widowmaker, because it is a monstrously fast, slightly intimidating machine that demands genuine respect. It is the final boss of the 911 world. There's also the GT4, which takes all of this GT philosophy and applies it to Porsche's smaller mid-engine sports car, the Cayman, giving people a more affordable way into the GT family. Same obsession, same DNA, smaller package. The rebellion that proved the point. Here's a story that tells you everything about how much these cars mean to the people who love them. A few years ago, Porsche made a decision. The GT3 would only be available with the PDK, their lightning-fast automatic gearbox. And from a pure performance standpoint, that made sense. The automatic is faster around a track than any human can shift a manual. But the purists, the diehards, were furious. Because for them, a GT car was never only about the lap time. It was about connection, about the involvement of rowing your own gears, of the car demanding something from you. Taking the manual away, to them, felt like the soul had been surgically removed. So Preuninger and his team did something remarkable. They listened. And they built a car specifically to answer that anger. They called it the 911R, borrowing a legendary name from a Porsche race car of the 1960s. It had the screaming, naturally aspirated GT3 engine. It had a manual gearbox. It had no big wing. It was stripped, pure, analog, and built for one type of person, the driver who values, feel above numbers. And the reaction was so extreme that the 911R instantly became one of the most valuable modern Porsches on the planet, with people paying wild multiples over its sticker price almost overnight. That's the whole GT philosophy in one story. It is not about chasing spec sheet bragging rights. It's about building the most engaging, most emotional, most honest driving machine possible for people who genuinely, deeply care about how a car makes them feel. Preuninger has said his dream project, the one he'd build with no rules and no limits, is basically the cars he already makes. Because the entire point of the GT department is chasing that feeling forever. Why this badge is worth more than gold. So let's bring it home. Why does that little GT badge command such insane devotion and such insane prices? Because it is genuine. In a world full of badges that are pure marketing, where an appearance package can slap a sporty name on an ordinary car, the GT badge means something real and verifiable. It means motorsport engineering done by the people who build the actual race cars with 1,000 different parts, a 9,000 RPM engine, and no shortcuts. You are not buying a trim level. You are buying a piece of Porsche's racing soul with a license plate bolted to it. And that's why the demand is genuinely insane. Porsche builds these cars in strictly limited numbers, and the waiting lists stretch for years. To even be allowed to buy the most special ones, you often have to prove your loyalty first by already owning several other Porsches, building up what buyers quietly call your allocation history. Think about how backwards that is. You have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on other cars just to earn the right to be offered the one you actually want. People do it anyway. And the second some of these cars leave the showroom, they're worth more used than they cost new. Sometimes double, because so many people want them, and so few exist. It's become one of the most exclusive buying processes anywhere in the car world, all for a bloodline that started life as a boring legal technicality nobody thought twice about. Think about that full circle. In 1999, the GT3 existed only because a rulebook forced Porsche to put a license plate on a race car. It was an afterthought, a car nobody in the building thought would matter. And now, 25 years later, it sits at the absolute summit of everything Porsche represents. It is the car that other Porsches dream of being, the badge that turns a great sports car into a legend. So the next time you're at a stoplight and a 911 pulls up, glance at the back. If it just says Carrera, you're looking at one of the best sports cars in the world. But if you see those two letters and a number GT3, if you hear an engine that sounds less like a car and more like a fighter jet clearing its throat, understand what you're actually looking at. That's not a luxury car, and it's not really even a road car. That's a race car that fooled the system, wearing a license plate, driven by someone who knows exactly what they've got. So now you know. GT isn't a trim. It isn't a styling package. It's the hardest, purest, most motorsport-obsessed thing Porsche builds. Born from an accident and raised into a religion by a man who had one poster on his childhood wall. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever driven a GT car, or even just heard one go past at full noise? And which one is the dream, the pure GT3, the savage GT3 RS, or the terrifying GT2 RS? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this made those three letters make sense, hit that like button and subscribe to MotorZen, because we break down the stories and the engineering behind the cars you actually care about, and there is a lot more where this came from. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.